everyone. Thank you for joining Internet 2 for today's webinar, From Pilot to Enterprise, How UC Santa Barbara Scaled AI-Powered Student Support. We're excited to have you with us for what promises to be an engaging and informative session. Before we get started, please note that this session is being recorded and will be shared and posted online after the event. So keep an eye out if you'd like to revisit the content or share it with colleagues. My name is Amber Walters, and I'm the Program Manager for Industry Membership and Engagement at Internet 2. I'll be your host for today's webinar. We're joined by UCSB and Internet 2 industry member and Cloud Scorecard participant, Gravyty. In today's session, we'll explore UCSB's AI journey and how they implemented services Ivy and Ocelot from Gravyty, starting with a small pilot and expanding into a campus-wide platform supporting students and helping staff. We'll look at how they scaled their approach, the use cases that emerged, and key lessons along the way. We have a fantastic lineup of experts who will share insights and practical takeaways you can take back to your own institutions. With that, I'll introduce our speakers. Tricia Rascon, Assistant Dean for Student Life at UC Santa Barbara. Beth Griesbauer, SVP Sales and Partnership at Gravyty. Paul Dorney, CTO at Gravyty. And Tara Jennis, our Net Plus Program Development Manager here at Internet 2. So Beth, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're happy to have you here with us, and big thank you to Internet 2 for hosting with us and supporting this webinar today. So as Amber said, we are going to be exploring UCSB's journey of implementing a enterprise-wide chatbot platform with Ivy and Ocelot from Gravyty. But first, I'm going to start it off and just assess the group with a poll. So whether you are just starting, already implemented, have vast experience or no experience, I'd love to hear from the audience where you and your institution are in the AI chatbot adoption journey. And again, no right or wrong answers. Typically, we meet customers who are at all stops along the way. So please take a moment and take the poll, and then we'll jump into the good stuff. All right. Thank you for participating. It looks like most of you are, at a perfect segue here to start learning more about how UCSB scaled from, small pilot to across the student journey. So let's jump into it. I would love to introduce you to Tricia. Tricia, can you give us a little backstory about the university and your timeline from pilot to where you are today with your chatbot platform?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. So great to join you. I'm Tricia Rascon, Assistant Dean for Student Life at UC Santa Barbara. UCSB, for those who aren't familiar, is a four-year public research university within the University of California system. And I formerly was the Director for Orientation Programs and Parent Services for 13 years on campus. So my background is really in the student services side within our Division of Student Affairs. I always like to start out my conversations about our chatbot by saying I'm not tech by trade or on the IT side, but my experience really is from the department and student services perspective. And our journey with the campus chatbot started as part of a work group that was looking at student return to campus after COVID and preparing to welcome back a large student body and 2 entering classes of students who had never physically navigated our campus. We have a very large undergraduate student population. As you can see here, it's about 25,000 students ranging across over 200 majors and degrees offered. And as many large campuses experience, our student services are all over campus in many different buildings. And so we were really looking at this issue of sending students from one building to the next to try to figure out where they were supposed to land. And on top of that, a lot of students who were brand new to navigating our campus. So we started with that as kind of our key problems or challenges to solve and looked to a chatbot to solve those.
So Tricia, that's super helpful. I'm going to ask you to go a layer deeper, right? You're a large public research university and you have 25,000 students. How do you even begin to attack the issue you were trying to solve? What did that look like? And I think it was 2022 that we started working together. And so in 2022, how did you, eat that elephant one bite at a time, to use a
Absolutely.
silly
So I
saying?
think really it was deciding, okay, where are we going to start? So I know in the next slide, we're going to talk more about the 5 pilot departments, but we're really identifying what were some of the key questions or challenges that students were having. What were the places where we found them kind of maybe going to the wrong department or resource or having to re-navigate where it was they were going. We also had staff that were telling us, we're really overloaded with questions, and a lot of this is on our websites, but our websites are very dense. There's a lot of information. So how do we direct students to the resources that are already there and help them navigate that information a little bit easier? And of course, this is within, limited staffing capacity, and also really wanting to ensure that students that had those kind of next level questions who really should be speaking with someone in person we're being directed to the right place to do that. So also freeing up staff time to answer those deeper questions that wouldn't be answered on a website, and then, to direct them to the correct person. So
Right.
yes, navigating the campus faster, reducing our phone and email volume, we're definitely at the top of those lists.
And I think what you're describing is something that, lots of institutions are experiencing, providing resources and communication channels for your students, but with not enough people to manage that volume. So my question is, was it always, did an AI chatbot immediately become, as you're talking with your peers about this experience you're having, an issue you're having, was it always a chatbot, or were there other things in consideration? Like what led you to actually, okay, we're going to go with the chatbot, then begin that process?
Yeah, I think seeing what other peer
Mhm.
institutions were doing and noticing also, I think student expectations, particularly around, we really think within this, our traditional office hours are 9 to 5 and answering those questions. And our student users in particular were saying, I have questions that come up at 2 a.m. or I have a question on a Saturday at 11 a.m. that I'm looking for an answer to. And we obviously, can't meet that type of demand with our traditional office structure. And so a chatbot, which students are getting, when they're on any business site looking to get a quick answer, was something that we saw as an expectation. They were telling us, why couldn't we have a tool like this to answer some of those questions during those non-business hours or during those business hours when they're on their phone and they're just going across campus and they have a question, to be able to really quickly get that answer. And so, in researching that, a chatbot seemed like a clear
Yeah.
indicator of where we should go.
So you decide it's a chatbot. How do you decide what chatbot? And I'm going to tag Paul here too to kind of ham and egg this, because there's a lot of chatbots out there, and I would argue they're not all created equal, right? It's not always apples to apples. So what were the things that were non-negotiable for you, and how did that end up aligning with where you are today?
Yeah. Now, one of the things that really struck us with the Ivy chatbot was the ability to have both a non live chatbot option, right? One that kind of had the answers that had been crawled on the website, that again was 24/7, but then also the ability to add in this live chat option. Some departments were really eager to do that from the beginning. For some departments, they were like, we do not have the staffing to do that. Is that going to be a requirement in order to have the chatbot? And so, we'll speak to that a little bit later, but that integration of both of those options was really important for us. Also, honestly, the crawling of the websites and the work being done up front. There were some chatbot options that we looked at where we really were needing to build that brain on our end. And we knew that our capabilities to do that would be limited. And so knowing that a part of the chatbot's creation was that being done on Ivy's end, the recrawling every 24 hours, when our website had updates, that was really huge for us as well. And then I think also looking down the line, there are integrations that we'll speak to that we weren't ready to do right at the beginning, but now as our chatbot has grown, we're really looking at and prepared as a campus to expand into. So how are we using our chatbot to engage with students with SMS, and how might that integrate into a student success hub that we're building? So really thinking long term of how the chatbot could grow as those different needs grew.
And Paul, can you speak to, I mean, you're the brains behind the operation. And so, this flexibility, I mean, that feels like it was the big piece of what you were building, right? Is it needs to be flexible and available to all different types of use cases.
Yeah, and Tricia kind of nailed exactly what our goal is, for the Ivy and Ocelot, as we come together and from Ivy itself is the goal is simple, meet students where they are and give them the support they need at the moment that they need it. So, I think Tricia made a great point of like at the weekends, after hours, and if you think of like even enrollment, when students want to know more about your school, etc., like that, giving them that option of
Mhm.
having a chatbot, also the live chat, texting, etc., like that. So, you've got email, telephony now. It's so no matter where your question comes in, the students can get an immediate, accurate response, which is the key, basically. And then we kind of touched a little bit on integration. So while it's amazing being able to like answer the questions based on your website, and then we use RAG and the AI to go out and make sure it's the most context specific answers. We also have campus-wide integrations where we can connect directly with the APIs for your SIS or CRMs, but we can also do custom workflows. So if you need specific webhook based approaches, so you're like, hey, we want our financial aid department to be able to answer this like section of questions, we can set that up with you as well. So the goal on the Ivy Ocelot is basically to make the platform fit cleanly into your existing environment. So we sit on top of your systems and can interact with them and give the student that personalized experience that, they can log in, basically get their specific information. And when you hear that, you're thinking, hey, is it secure? What about the student information and all that sort of stuff? So, if for anyone not aware with the other platforms, we're SOC 2 compliant, and we make sure that all PII is scrubbed. We've got specific guardrails, so information is not just going out to large language models. Everything is very strict and guardrailed, and institutions can trust that every interaction is safe, audible, and meets the internal and external requirements. Because ultimately, our goal is to scaling the personalized student support. So, increasing the workload capacity of your departments so that, if you had unlimited time and a student came into your office, you could give them the best experience they could get. And the goal for our platform is giving them that in their pocket on their computers, and it can scale across the campus. And there's a bunch of stuff that will be coming as well in the future, which I know is not for now, but like that's why we really appreciate Trish and everyone from like diving in and starting with the pilot program. They approached it in a really cool way so that they could kind of build layer upon layer. And now, as we mentioned, we can go deeper on the integrations. We're continuously adding integrations, but if we want to kind of jump into how the pilot program and the
Yeah,
different kind of building blocks.
I think that's the perfect segue. So, with all of that, Trisha, how did you decide like who gets to go first or who is going first? How did you prioritize those?
Yeah, so so as I shared before, our chatbot is housed within our student affairs division, and so we did several surveys of our directors of those departments to ask, what are the needs, how prepared would you feel to launch a chatbot for your department, and then really identified departments that were serving really diverse populations of students and covering a variety of campus services.
Okay.
So, selfishly, I was very excited that orientation programs was selected. I was the director for that department at the time. It made sense as I was kind of helping to pilot this project to see how it would work within our department. So again, serving parents and new incoming students, the main audience for that department and website. Our registrar's office, as most campuses know, like a wealth of information. So really core academic enrollment questions, path to graduation. Student health reached out as a department that had a very high frequency, particularly of phone calls, and was looking to really have the bot help students find information on their website, which has a
Mhm.
lot of information, and students have shared they sometimes get a little lost in there trying to find what they're looking for. Our educational opportunity program, which primarily serves our first generation and income eligible students. And then our well-being site. And this was a unique one in that it's not a department, but it was a new website that had launched that was focused on several departments with a well-being focus. So included
Mhm.
information from student health, our counseling and psychological services, our health and wellness department. So we were really excited to add this one because we knew that it would be pulling information from multiple departments just by crawling that one website. So we
Right.
landed on those five, and those were our pilot departments.
So, I'm one question I have is you said you survey departments about whether they were ready or prepared, I think is the word you used. What does prepared to implement a chatbot mean at UCSB?
Sure. Well, the first one was, is your website relatively up to date, or would you be able to get it up to date? Because I think that is obviously really important that we're crawling accurate and up to date information as much as possible. And some departments have been in the transition of transitioning to, you know, a new platform. So would it make sense to then wait and have a chatbot? The other piece was being prepared to go through the training and implementation process. And something I really wanted to make sure folks knew is, well, Ivy Gravyty does the majority of the work and the crawling, and that is a substantial piece. It does take work on the upkeep end, right? To be really engaging with the bot, continuing to train the bot's brain, particularly for these first five. You know, we like to describe our bot as, you know, it was a baby, it was an infant. It knew what it knew from those 5 sites. It looks very different now with its brain with 19 sites, but wanting
Right.
to be really
It got
honest about
older, more mature. Yeah, I love
exactly,
that analogy.
exactly. But in the infant stages, it takes more time. And as we'll share later, you know, learning of what students expect the bot to know versus what it does know in those beginning stages. So just really wanting to make sure departments felt ready to take that on as being a part of a pilot.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So Paul, so I think we could all agree that you named 5 departments that are not necessarily under the same organizational structure within the institution. So, you know, Paul, can you talk about how the platform is built with that in mind and the ability to create a single source of truth for students while not impacting the individual functionarial workflows?
Yeah, and the concept there we have is like the shared brain.
Mhm.
So you can think of it like each office builds its own set of questions and answers. So let's say financial aid might have a full library of content, and then from there you choose which virtual assistants get access to that content. So if admissions need some of those answers, they can simply inherit them without having to recreate them. So it's kind of one to many. So again, that helps with the upkeep as well and stuff like that. But at the same time, each office can layer in their own custom questions for additional content, etc., like that. And you can choose to share which ones you want. So that means if a student asks question, because students want to ask the question, they don't care which office they're asking. They're like, get me the answer. But it does give you extra control. Like a good example of something that you don't necessarily want to share is like the admissions office. Like when do we open? Like the another office might not have that. So if you think of it as a centralized area where you can very much curate, update, and then share out to other brains, as we call them, so that you have the most context-aware responses for the student. And then, you know, if as well, then if there's no answer with it, what we'll do is we will actually it'll only respond like with a super high confidence answer. But if that fails, we then go out actually into generative AI, where it's using the information from your website, that the question, etc., to go out and see if we can get rewording the question too to determine can we get that answer, and then to make sure that we return a high confidence score to the user. So if you think of it, it's not like silos inside the university where if you're implementing this, that each department is like left on their own. It can very much be a collaborative setup, and there's content packs, etc., that you can share across. So some content that automatically comes with the system that you can then hit the ground running. As Tricia mentioned, it's only as good as like the website you have, and then also with our content packs. We come with like 20 years of curated data that you can actually bring into your system as well to give you that beefy answers for the students. And you can share them across all your departments.
Tricia, anything to add to that? I mean, how do you? It's one thing to say, hey, you need to commit to looking at the data, but what did that actually look like real time as you were going through this process? And what are some of those learnings that maybe you could suggest or add to help the audience understand what to expect?
Well, I think that the testing part of our bot has just become so critical. We learned a lot during this first race, particularly, this in the last bullet point on this slide, thinking about student language and the way students will ask something is often very different than the way we might be using, the formal language that we know as administrators or student service providers, and students will find out are calling it something completely different amongst themselves. And so when they ask the bot that, being able to train it to understand that that's a variant of this particular term or question was really important. But on the front end, a lot of departments, our instinct is, well, we'll do some testing. I'll send it to some colleagues, and we've really set up a formalized, like, nope, we're going to have student testers. And if you don't have them, I'm going to find you some student leaders, but we're going to have students be in there so that from the beginning, before we even launch your bot, we've done as much as we can to understand what students are asking. It also helps with the students expecting answers to come from anywhere, or what they think a department maybe focuses on or has an answer to that they don't. You know, our
Right.
registrar's office has been the biggest example of that, I would say. They had so many questions that were around billing and financial aid, because when you see a registration block that's
It's
maybe
all
associated with the
encompassing.
billing, you think I'm going to reach out to the registrar's office.
Yeah.
And so even though those departments weren't a part of our chatbot yet, okay, how are we adding to the brain? How are we redirecting students with even just some basic redirections of, that's a financial aid question, let's get you over to the financial aid website, or let's get you into their phone queue. But we learned a lot about students' expectations, about what they wanted the bot to know, and how to use that shared brain capacity.
Yeah, I love that. And how, so do you feel, so it sounds like there's learnings, right, on your part of how students are communicating. And I think what you called out was, a lot of our customers will say, oh, we're going to test it. We'll just have, I'll have my colleague test it. And it always comes down to, we think we know how students engage and how they ask for things. And it's always so interesting because when it finally gets in the hands of the students, you learn so much stuff about their communication patterns and styles.
Absolutely.
So on the next slide, if we could advance. Um, so let's talk about kind of what happened then, right? You implemented these pilot areas, and how did you get that to scale?
Yeah. So I would joke in the beginning that I felt like I was a little bit of a salesperson, just really reaching out to departments who had been on the list, who either had indicated interest or maybe wanted to learn more. And I followed up by doing some presentations for departments, and having some actual analytics after our first 5 to show, this is how often it's being used. This is what we've learned with the types of questions students are asking. And also identifying departments that, based on what students were asking, we would say, I think you'd be a great fit to come on board, because you would really add to the bot's brain. What it's already trained in would help your department. So that was really helpful in identifying who to go next. I found it easier to kind of approach it from this cohort
Mhm.
place. So, we run on a quarter system at UCSB. And rather than having kind of one-off bots being added, I've been approaching it in cohorts of kind of 4 to 5 departments. And then we approach it as a quarter-long process that, there's 10 weeks in a quarter, and we're going to plan for this project to take approximately 10 weeks from the start of crawling to going through training to testing your bot to making sure that you feel really ready to launch. But I think doing that with other departments, right, learning from their
Yeah.
experience, testing each other's chat bots during that has been super helpful. And so I really, I like our approach of the kind of the cohort model for how we launch our bots.
Yeah, I love that because it kind of feels like, you're going to training almost with a group of colleagues, and you're learning together. I really like that. And might steal it and share it with other with other people soon.
And
So,
we've been able to centralize the bot, in that I serve as our project manager
mhm.
for our campus in the bot. And then it's the commitment of the departments when they come on board, of having at least 1 to 2 staff members who go through the whole training process and are responsible for their department's individual bot. And so I usually do the trainings with all of the departments, and I'm kind of the check-in point between the department and Gravyty on how we're doing and questions that come up. But I think it's helpful to have, if you're able to, kind of someone who is able to look at the bigger picture, kind of who's represented in the bots, who are we missing, who should we reach out to more to kind of, add to the project. I think that has been helpful for our campus.
What are some of the challenges that you ran into as you continued this journey?
Mhm. I think there is a fear, might be too big of a word, but there's a risk that folks feel with a chatbot maybe getting things wrong, right?
Mm.
Like, what if it gives the wrong answer? What does that look like? And so walking folks through, I think, our chief of staff, who's been a part of this project, he liked to say in the beginning, like, one of the things we have to remember is right now, a student could walk into any of the many front desks on our campus, ask a question, and get an answer that we may or may not know is correct based on if they're asking about that particular department. With the bot, at least we're able to track that and say, oh, that wasn't exactly the answer we would want to give.
I like
What's
that.
also helpful is that it's kind of, it's AI within a safety net. And and Beth and Paul can correct me if this isn't the right term, but the kind of the closed AI, in that the bot can only know what it is we are teaching it from the website. So it doesn't have the ability to really to go rogue and give an answer that you're like, where did that come from? We're always able to trace it back and say, oh, that answer wasn't correct, or that feels outdated. Oh, now I can see the website that it pulled that from, or I can see the outdated custom response that I need to update. So I think letting folks know that, like, yes, the bot isn't going to be able to answer everything, but our ability to correct it, to train it for the next time that it's asked, and to learn what students are asking and how we can grow the bot's brain is really unique, and something that we have a control over to a certain extent. And I know we share later on, our student health department decided to do kind of a short intake form because they really wanted to be able to follow up with folks. Whereas other bots, it is an anonymous experience. You don't have to log into anything. But I think that's a very relevant concern, and one that we kind of talk through as we talk about bot accuracy and training of it.
Can we jump into some of those? Let's jump into what mattered to you, right? And so did you have consistency, do you feel, in cohorts, right? So you kind of had a playbook now to continue to scale from that first cohort, your learnings.
Yeah, yes. So setting those expectations, and especially after the first 5, learning what some of maybe the initial or early challenges were, even being able to give folks an approximation of here's how often I'm in the chat bot, right? I think it's a relief to say, like, 2 times a week, if you can put an hour on your calendar in the beginning, 2 times a week. And I think that's reassuring for folks who are like, oh, you're not having to be in there all the time. And I'm like, no, it's not. This is not meant to be an additional job to, every day have to be in there with the bot, but being realistic and being able to give them that expectation. Something that has been really interesting that we've learned as we've gotten larger with the bot is I've kind of come up with a list of shared terminology or words that different departments use differently, that the bot might be trained to read on one, instance to mean one thing, and in another department it might mean something different. And so building that into every bot, because with the shared brain, for example, if the bot were to go on to our advising website and say, I want to speak with a counselor, we use really the term advisor for, academic advising. And so wanting to make sure the bot doesn't say, I can't find counselor, so I'm going to jump to EOP's bot because they use counselor, and it's going to pull that answer. And so now we know, okay, every bot should have a train of what does this word mean for your particular department, so that it's giving an answer for that department. And again, we wouldn't have really known that until the bots expanded. And so being able to talk about that in training and say, okay, we're all going to go into our bots and build our custom responses so that it knows what that term means for your particular department, has been important.
Has that impacted, and maybe it's, I don't know, because it's such a big institution, but have any of your learnings impacted the website content itself? Or did you have any, I don't mean to put you on the spot because maybe the answer is no, but did you have any aha moments, like as an institution, where you're like, we need to kind of get a little tighter on how we're referring to A, B, and C, or anything like that?
I think where I've seen it most is folks looking at their websites, and so for example, orientation did a redesign of our website about a year after our bot had launched, and it really helped us inform how we were going to structure that. We knew based on the chatbot questions, okay, folks are really struggling to find the program schedule. We got, so many questions. And so how can we have that be more visible right up front of where you find that on the website? And I've had other departments say, oh yeah, the bot didn't know this, but it should. So we need to figure out why our website isn't addressing that. Where should we add a page or a section for that? Or the outdated information. I had a great example come up of, I think one of our departments, we were testing their bot and they said, this answer's coming up for our department, but it's outdated and it's not coming from our website. And we were able to see, oh, it's actually coming from this department's website that's referencing. So now we can reach out. That we wouldn't have been able to do that before, right? To have something tell us this is where the misinformation is. Now we can get that website updated, and the bot will no longer pull that misinformation. And in general, that website is now updated. So that it's been helpful in that way. But I think it does raise some bigger conversations that our campus could have around some of the terms that students are confused around, and how we kind of throw around some of these things and they mean, yeah, different things that could be really confusing.
Yeah. Can we jump in, if we could skip ahead and talk about what the features that really made a difference for you all? Because I think, Paul and has so much insight and how these channels were created and the why. And I'd love for you to talk through some of those, Tricia, and Paul, kind of what those things were for you and how they were effective.
I think one of the first questions that I asked departments to think about and brainstorm, at a department meeting or with their colleagues is, if you could solve like the top 10 basic questions that you get asked, that you just think that information is on our front page of our website, or why don't folks know this? We talk about this all the time. What would that be? And how can we get folks immediately to those answers through your pathway buttons? And so that has been
Okay.
really huge, of building those around the most common questions that folks are looking to solve. So for folks who don't know, when you open the chat bot, you have the option of kind of your welcome message, and then these buttons that are pathways to particular topics. So I think the one here is for our registrar's office. And so you can really quickly get to like the top 7 or 8 questions. And then you can have, when you click on that, another series of buttons if it's more, detailed, or you can have an answer that sends them to additional details on the website, or an answer to the question. So that has been great. We see those buttons used significantly in a lot of our bots.
Now, Paul, this is a question for you. If I'm a student and nothing in my choices of the buttons are anything that I'm interested in, it's something outside of that, can I simply just ask a question and it will also respond?
Yeah, exactly. So if you ask the question, it'll go off and it'll find, like I mentioned earlier, it'll find the actual answer for you based on a confidence score above like 85%. And then even if we know people call stuff differently, there can be different slang terms, etc. like that. It'll actually pick that up, be able to convert it and actually go find you that answer. So I think the last count was like at 98% accuracy based
Wow.
on any kind of terminology and stuff like that. So that's the cool thing of that. Like, students, we always see the transcripts and some interesting ways that questions are asked that the system can learn on, train, and continue to deliver up to you. And then some other cool things, we were talking about like gaps in the websites and stuff, is like the gap analysis to be able to see where students are asking the questions, what's important to them, and everything like that. So it does give like the internal staff a pulse of the campus of like, hey, this is the stuff that's trending. These are the topics that students care about at the moment. So that's kind of a really cool thing as well, because you can then, beef up that content, go into those
Yeah.
custom questions, kind of tailor them, knowing that, hey, this is the stuff that people really want at the moment.
Or yeah, so updating these pathways based on like, oh, we thought graduation was an important topic, but turns out this is. So let's, update that. Yeah, I love the flexibility. I think it's important for students though as well. Sometimes they don't know what they're looking for, and these kind of guided like, here's some topics you'll probably, having that flexibility for guidance or simply just conversational back and forth. What about SMS and other channels, Trish? If we can advance a slide, are you utilizing, it looks like you are, SMS messaging? So text messaging, is that to send out campaigns or just to allow students to text with the bot?
Yeah, so we're kind of just jumping into our SMS messaging. So we did a kind of a small a pilot program at the end of summer. So in working with our new orientation director, she had mentioned we have our advising day, which is kind of a makeup orientation for folks who don't attend, and it's a pretty important day to get them ready to register and get signed up to speak with an advisor. and the registration numbers were low.
Mhm.
And you know, something we haven't addressed here, but I think everyone can relate to, is the email fatigue our students are feeling. And so I'm sure that the email about advising day was one of 72 that they had gotten from our campus that week.
Mhm.
And so we thought, what is another way we can reach them? And so we did a little pilot campaign and said, let's get the 75 students who haven't signed up. Let's send them a really brief, short text that directs them to the orientation website. And let's see how many we can get signed up over the weekend before Monday's program. And I think of those, it was at least 30% of students who within those 48 hours signed up and showed up to that Monday program. And I can tell you, as a former person who used to send email after email trying to get students to that program, we did not have that type of response to emails. So I think students are clearly, again, telling us that this is the type of communication that they're hoping for and expecting from campuses. And we want to think about how we use that in a way that it doesn't become text fatigue. And so we're strategically looking at, we're going to do a campaign, hopefully this winter and spring, of some kind of almost wellness check-ins, just general. It's going to be from our dean of students, like, how's it going? Can I connect you to any resources? And get a pilot group and see. And this one will be a two-way campaign where students can text back to our chatbot. I think folks have seen our chatbot's name is Storky, after Stork Tower, which is behind me in our photo. But Storky and our dean reaching out and engaging in that conversation and seeing how students respond and what type of services and resources they're looking to be connected with.
That's great. And Paul, so the text messaging, it's two-way, right? So they're sending out, but can students simply text instead of going on the computer to ask a question?
Yeah, exactly. Students can text back, and then institutions can also set up bot-backed campaigns as well,
Mm.
especially for registration, etc. So you're not having to respond to 10,000 text messages. You can set up your little trees of like what are the different, depending on the questions, what path you want to send the student down to. So this kind of gives the student a lot of flexibility too and how they want to communicate with you as well and gather more information before they might need to take it to an advisor, etc. like
Yeah.
that. That's really cool. And some of the other stuff that I don't think it's been released yet for yourselves, but like, creating campaigns just by simply typing in, hey, I want a campaign for this, and it's kind of AI backed campaigns as well, where you can actually create all the content and it'll
Very
send out
cool.
to the students, and then the students can respond in, and you can either put Storky on it or a different bot, etc. like that. So it'll kind of free you up as well to have more of that input. And like another use case from another student or college was, I loved you said like you got 30% response. That was similar like recently for, I think it was last year during Thanksgiving, they sent out a campaign, and usually like I think it was under 1% response rate, and then they got up to 30 to 40% as well, and they were delighted. Now, you said the great thing of text fatigue and following certain guidelines and stuff like that. So I love that you're already doing that, because sometimes that's one of the kind of recommendations we give too, of like don't blast
Don't
students
overdo
with tons
it.
and tons of texts. Yeah. But the students do really like that. That's one of the kind of our top rated features that they get, that they feel like connected to the campus.
Yeah. So Tricia, if we go to the next slide, I want to take this a step further, what Paul's saying. So we're talking about text messaging. Did every department utilize text messaging or connecting to a live agent? How does that work? Did it have the flexibility? Is everyone doing the same thing? If you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So one of the primary questions folks had at the beginning, or maybe some of their hesitation, was, do we have to be ready to do live chat? Which is a wonderful feature, but is certainly not required. And actually, I would argue is easier maybe to add on once you've gotten used to your chat bot and you've learned it, but it's very simple to get trained and add that later. And once folks knew, you're not having to commit to live chat coverage from the beginning. That was big for them. And also knowing that they could then add that on later on, and that wouldn't be a problem. And then the other piece was working with our departments like student health that really had a legitimate concern of, if a student doesn't get the answer to their question and it's health related, we really would like a way to follow up with them. And so Ivy was really great in saying, great, we can do that. They wanted to turn off low confidence responses so that if the
Mhm.
bot wasn't sure, to immediately kind of say, let's get you connected with someone, but also to do a short intake form so that they could follow up. So that type of flexibility and knowing the different departments are going to have different needs
Mhm.
was really important and has been really big in getting department buy-in to come on board.
Yeah, so you mentioned low confidence. And so for those of you in the audience who are like, low confidence. I know what it means in theory, but what does it mean to a chatbot? So if the platform isn't 100% sure that here's the exact answer, it will provide what we call a low confidence, which is links to guide them to where you could find information. And so it sounds like at UCSB, you were able to really get specific about what triggered an escalation to a live person in the office. So I'd love to hear that. So if we go, like, let's go to the outcome. Like, how does this all look now? What's the impact been? If we can go to the next slide, let's talk about where you landed and how that's helped the institution. There we go.
Yes, so I know we have some stats on the slide after this, but just to give you kind of a general overview, students getting anytime answers. And so we're definitely see some significant peaks and kind of after hour usage of our bot. Orientation, we launched our bot that first year right when our registration opened because we knew we had a short window of time. We have about 8 weeks when almost every new student and their parent is on our website, and then it goes very quiet because they've all come to orientation and they've moved on to the other campus services. So we really were tracking, especially in those first two registration, orientation, reservation cycles, and noticed that our phone traffic and our email traffic was going down and that the questions we were getting were much more nuanced and ones that the bot wouldn't be able to answer. Student health let us know that they were seeing a decrease in their phone traffic and that the questions that they were getting were not how do I make an appointment, which before they were like, it's right there on our website. Like those kind of questions were being answered very quickly with the bot.
I
And I
love
think
that.
too, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'd love to hear that because that's what you want, right? You want the staff available to have those deeper conversations that require the expertise. So I interrupted you. Go on.
And I think that last bullet point is one that's really been important to me, is really thinking of this not as a department by department tool, but how is this a campus-wide tool and resource that everyone is invested in? I think one of my hopes with Storky is that we're all growing the same resource, right? That becomes smarter and more useful to our students versus everyone with their own bot that has different degrees of knowledge and is very department focused. Because I think in
Right.
the end, what really reduces our workload is the bot being able to answer those questions coming from all of those different departments and resources. And so in growing that, I think that has been really great, and folks kind of are starting to know. And I see a great question that's come up in the chat about like, how is it being managed and is it centralized? And while we don't have a specific team, we are a team of all of the different departments who are admin together. We meet quarterly to check in. How are the bots doing? What are questions that are coming up? And they are, ambassadors and advocates for the bots in the circles that they are in and talking about what it has done for their department. So that has been huge.
I love it. So I'm actually, before I get arrested by the webinar police, I skipped the second poll, and this is a great segue to that. So if we can go back to that poll a couple slides back. So after hearing all of the features and the experience of UCSB, I'd love to poll the audience, which area of student support would make the biggest difference for your students right now if you had to pick one? So whether it's providing 24/7 support or, preserving the staff to be available for those deeper conversations, I'm interested to hear each of your perspectives on that in your respective institutions. All right. Thank you, everyone, for participating. I'd love to close out and look at the numbers. Like, let's look at really what the impact has been at UCSB. And it looks like scaling across more apartments and additional use cases is a hot topic along with 24/7 support. And I think that you've shared so far today, Tricia, that you've accomplished both of those. So I love to hear that. So when we go to Storky by the numbers, please do tell, what did all of this bring you at the end of the day so far?
Yes, so we are at 19 bots, and again, we started with 5, and we have 3 bots outside of our division. So that goal of being campus wide, not just having it be a divisional tool, is is being reached, and I'm really, really excited to grow those numbers of campus partners. We're almost at 40,000 chats. I think it was like 39,700 and change when I looked last. So that's across 2.5 years, which is a significant number of conversations. When I looked at the orientation bot, again, those button clicks and getting folks right to the resources they were looking for has been huge for that department. I would say the registrar's bot and our housing bot as well of using the buttons and the pathways. And then again, thinking about the goal of serving students 24/7, 30% of conversations are taking place outside of business hours and on weekends. It's higher for some bots. I believe our letters and science advising bot is above that. And our student health bot might also be slightly above that. So knowing that our users are utilizing this when our offices aren't open.
Yeah, and you think about the alternative, right? If Storky wasn't there, where are all of those going and whose inbox are they landing in, right, to get through? So
Yes.
wow, that's a staggering number, right? But makes sense when you think about how students, do their work and at what times. So let's wrap this up and talk about kind of like what are our takeaways here, Tricia? What if you could sum it up for everyone? Here are the things you need to know to be successful in your AI chatbot scaling journey.
Well, I think number one is if you can identify where you can make the biggest impact with those first few departments across diverse student resources, right? So is there an academic department that is, academic focused, or in your enrollment services unit that maybe could then the bot's brain could feed other enrollment services information? Something like orientation or housing or some of those really big impact. I think having at least one of those departments come on board for your pilot program can really get you high usage with students. Definitely showcasing those success stories, and also honestly the challenges, right? We're talking about, again, being really realistic about the time and the preparation to make sure that your bot is successful, as successful as possible, has been really important for us. Wanting to grow it outside of our division. And so, as I said before, we're getting to that place of it being a campus-wide tool. But I think thinking large like that, and even if that might feel really daunting at first, and you may not think that you have the team or the ability to do that. And I will share, I'm a team of one in terms of our project manager, and all of the departments have someone who is managing their bot. But it is not my full-time job managing the bot. It is a piece of it, and I feel like it's a really manageable piece. And I think we've built a system, a training system. We have guides and best practices that we use as our campus. So I think if you have those in place, the idea of scaling it and building it doesn't have to be as daunting. You don't need a whole team of folks who are separately focused on that, which was really important for us. We definitely didn't have the resources to have someone whose whole job was going to be managing our chatbot. We talked about setting clear expectations, and framing it as that campus resource. And I think thinking about where it can go, knowing that all of the different opportunities for integration or customizing it, you don't have to be ready to do that from day one. We are just now, over 2 years later, venturing into some of those because this is when we're ready for it. But knowing that it's there and being able to really set some goals for where you'd like to go with it.
And I think you said it with the infant, infant and growing. I think it's similar in your journey of implementing, right? Walk before you jog, jog before you run. So Paul, anything to add about learnings you've had and adjustments you've made and how we're working to continue to evolve with higher education?
Yeah, I think Tricia did a great job there saying, about the upkeep and, while it's manageable, etc., like that. One of the things we are looking into as well, and something we have some pilot programs in, is how do we automate that more so it's even less on you? That's something that's really top of mind for ourselves that we're working on, and that's leveraging some of that RAG and AI architecture that we can actually go out, see low confidence scores, come back with actually higher confidence results, but then again, we always say it's not AI, it's human-centered AI. So, but serving that up for you so you can be like, oh yeah, that makes sense, that doesn't make sense, that makes sense, etc. So it's refreshing that content, keeping your website as up to date and fresh as possible with the information we can find elsewhere, etc., like that, so that you're always in control of it, but it's less work on you, like, hey, I'm creating these custom questions, I'm adding content here, where the system itself can continue to learn. And, as the models get better, it's going to continuously get better. We've had a big jump in our accuracy this past year. And then just some other stuff of like, I think you said it great, is like, this is a tool. It's basically there to empower folks to do their jobs better and actually meet with the students. So we're continuously looking for the next year of like, what can we do of, predictive analytics? How can we serve you better, where you can see where there might be some gaps in content, some gaps in processes, etc., like that. So that's the kind of big thing that the learnings we're getting, when we work with great partners like yourself, and like seeing how you use it and then how we can optimize it to make sure it's easier for you to use going forward. But I know a big one is refreshing the content, keeping it up to date. And then we have a team internally here that, when there's what you call it, like when there's like governmental updates or policy changes, etc., that in the content packs, they can refresh that, and then it goes across all of our customers as well, which I think is going to be really helpful.
So we have some time for questions. So please pop your questions in the chat. And as we start to see those populate, I would love to talk a little bit about the analytics, right? So what analytics are you really finding useful, Tricia? And I also want to touch on security and accessibility, if Paul can chime in after Tricia talks about the data and how they've used the analytics.
Yeah, so looking at definitely the buttons and the pathways that are most being used across the bots. There are several great features in the analytics that are, I think I'm gonna blank on the name of this. Paul, you can help me. Is it I want to say hot topics, but it's like the map
Cluster analysis.
Thank you, the cluster
My
analysis.
favorite too.
Yes, where you can see the most questions that are being asked about a particular topic and how those questions are being phrased. You also can run a report to see how your top 100 questions and answers compare to similar departments or services that Gravyty has, which has been really great to see, like, how are we doing and where could we add to our bot's brain. And then, honestly, just getting into the chats and seeing how students and users are asking questions and, building the custom responses, that is the most useful for me, as I have time on my calendar every week that I just will grab a random bot and get into the chat and see what is really popular that students are asking right now, and how is the bot doing in answering that. And we all know, based on where you're at in your quarter or semester, we're starting to really understand the themes of questions. There's also, your bot has a banner that you can update. And so some of our departments are really on top of, make sure to update our banner that registration opens today and is going to be open until this date, or, when orientation reservations go live, that's at the top of our banner. So really thinking about some of those call out messages too, and how those are helping our users navigate the bot.
Yeah. And from a privacy and security accessibility, Paul, can you speak? I know you mentioned SOC 2, but what is our stance on that, and how do we address the importance of those topics?
Yes, something super important is, especially when you're leveraging AI and LLMs, is making sure that any PII information is scrubbed from any request that goes out from your system, basically. So we ensure that that is all locked down, so no information ever goes out there. The other part that's super important is the threat detection. So, threat word monitoring, but also giving the user the ability to actually set their threshold on certain threat words or threat situations, so that you can get notified instantly if there's any kind of misuses of your system or anything like that. That's also really, really important for us. And then the testing for accuracy. So making sure that your bot is up to date, accurate with any of the latest nomenclature that's out there. So it's kind of gives you that central oversight. So it keeps things tight, so that you can actually ensure that, there's no misuse of your bots, there's no data, like you can see all your transcripts, any questions asked, answered, etc., like that. So you can see that everything's scrubbed, everything cleaned. And as Beth mentioned, we have all of our certs, our SOC 2s, etc., all that fun stuff that everyone loves doing. So everything is locked down and secure, and you're in control of all of your data as well. So that's the important thing too. We're not leveraging your data for anything like that. So your data is your own.
right? So if I can sum that up, safe, accurate, private. Good. All right.
Nailed it. Yep, nailed it.
So any final thoughts, Tricia, Paul, questions? I hope we didn't put everyone to sleep and we've just been so thorough that you know everything you need to know. Please throw questions in the chat, but closing thoughts from Tricia, Paul, and we can wrap up the conversation.
I would just one thing to add, and I kind of touched on it a little bit, is the flexibility of the integration. So the system, while powerful out of the box, it only gets better as you go cross campus and integrate it more on top of your existing systems, because that gives the more personalized experience for the students, and it just makes it more of a useful tool as well. So we're happy to like work with the teams, whether they come out of the box integrations or some custom integrations that the Gravyty team work with. But that's what I would kind of say as well, is like if whatever you're using, the answer will always invariably, even though the developers will kill me, will be, yeah, we'll figure it out. But there's tons that come straight out of the box, your CRMs, SISs. But then if you have any particular stuff, we're happy to work with those as well, because the goal is to ensure that the students are getting that kind of personalized experience.
Yeah.
I think I would just add, if you're interested in a chatbot but are concerned that you aren't from the IT space or this wouldn't be housed in your IT department. I know one of the questions was like, is IT involved? Our IT department was obviously definitely a part of our contract process and making sure it met all of the expectations for IT services on our campus, and took part in our training so that they really understood how the bot worked. And then of course they were the ones to, put the bot onto the websites, but that really has been the only management they have needed to do. And so I think, I have learned about our bot as our project grew, and it really has been from the student services perspective. And Ivy and Gravyty have really provided all of the tech and the AI behind the scenes support and knowledge that we've needed to be successful with ours. So I would say I wouldn't be concerned about adding it because IT isn't where it will be housed. I don't think that that's something that prevents your campus from being a part of this.
Well, thank you, Tricia, so very much. And Internet too. Tara, I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you everyone for joining us today.
Yes, on behalf of Internet too, thank you, Tricia, Paul, and Beth, for a very engaging conversation about the use of the chatbot at UC Santa Barbara. I want to invite those who are attending or viewing the recording, if you're interested in working with us on a Net Plus service evaluation for Gravyty, to please reach out. I put the email address there in the chat, but we had an engaging session last week with Cornell and New York University about their use of the Ivy Ocelot Gravyty combined organization, and just want to see if there are others that are interested in joining us in a service evaluation to do some of those things that Paul was talking about, whether it's the security assessment, the accessibility integrations, doing that as a community so that we can combine the expertise from both customers and prospects to evaluate the service and develop a Net Plus program. So look forward to working with you all further. And again, thank you everyone for attending.